Let's dive right into this explainer by challenging a piece of advice you've probably heard a million times. The whole just do your best work and let your talent speak for itself thing. Sounds great, right? But here's the reality. In the hidden game of power, whether we're talking about a royal court or a modern corporate boardroom, showing off your raw, unfiltered brilliance, it's often a fatal trap. So today, we're decoding Robert Greene's famous rulebook to figure out exactly why playing down your genius might literally be the smartest career move you ever make. Greene's core premise with this very first law just completely goes against our modern instincts. I mean, we're taught to stand out, right? Be the brightest bulb in the box. But Greene argues that if you display too much talent, you don't get promoted, you get targeted, because social dynamics are rarely about who is actually the most talented person in the room. It's all about perception and, well, the incredibly delicate art of making those above you feel superior. So think about your own boss or mentor for a second. Have you ever completely knocked a presentation out of the park or solved a massive problem no one else could touch, and instead of applause, you got crickets? Or maybe even a weird, icy distance from leadership? If you've ever gotten the cold shoulder after a major win, well, you've probably bumped right into Law 1 without even realizing it. Fouquet's fatal masterpiece, the danger of being too good. Let's jump back to 1661 France to see how this counterintuitive rule plays out in real life. Enter Nicolas Fouquet, the incredibly brilliant and wealthy finance minister for a young King Louis XIV. Fouquet desperately wanted to prove his worth, so he built this breathtakingly perfect chateau called Vaux-le-Vicomte. I mean, it was so lavish, it actually inspired the Palace of Versailles. To top it off, he threw the ultimate, over-the-top party at this estate just to prove, once and for all, that he was the most cultured, indispensable man in the realm. And he went all out. We're talking a lavish 7-course meal featuring exotic foods literally never before seen in France. He commissioned entirely original music for the evening, and for the grand finale, a massive, unprecedented fireworks display over the canals of his gardens. It was an absolute masterpiece of an event. But instead of securing his spot as the king's right-hand man, it completely backfired. His monumental flex didn't inspire awe in the young king. It inspired deep, deep insecurity. Louis XIV felt totally overshadowed in his own kingdom, and the result? Fouquet was arrested the very next morning and spent the absolute rest of his life in prison. He made the ultimate fatal mistake. He outshone the person he was trying to please. Galileo's stellar strategy, the masterclass in managing up. So, how do we actually showcase our value without triggering our boss's ego? Enter the brilliant astronomer Galileo Galilei in the year 1610. Now, for years, Galileo had been struggling, begging different dukes and kings for patronage, stuck in this loop of total financial insecurity. But then, he made a massive discovery: the moons of Jupiter. Now, a normal instinct would be to scream this from the rooftops, take all the credit, and aggressively showcase his own undeniable genius. But Galileo? He made a highly calculated, strategic move instead. The contrast here is just staggering. While Fouquet essentially built a giant flashing monument crying out, "Look at me," Galileo took his groundbreaking discovery and deliberately pointed the spotlight completely away from himself. He told his patron, Cosimo I of Medici, that the 4 new moons actually represented Cosimo's 4 sons. He shifted the entire narrative from "look at my genius" to "look at your divine greatness." He even went so far as to name them the Medicean stars. By handing the brilliance of this discovery over to the Medici family and making them feel so comfortably superior, Galileo didn't just win a little bit of funding. He secured a lifetime of power, patronage, and absolute security. He gave them the glory, and they gave him the safety to do his work. Now that is the velvet glove of power. The root: human insecurity, peeling back the psychological layers. To actually use this rule today, we have to understand exactly why bosses, mentors, and gatekeepers feel so intensely threatened by our success. Strip away the castles, the kings, the fancy 17th century outfits, and it really just boils down to one simple raw emotion: insecurity. When a mentor or boss no longer feels needed, like when the student clearly surpasses the teacher, it triggers these deep-seated feelings of jealousy and inadequacy. A mentor feels powerful when they're teaching you, but the second you outgrow them, that power evaporates and panic sets in. And you absolutely cannot afford to ignore this. If you fail to manage someone's ego, trust me, it will haunt you. There's this crazy story from the source material about a podcast host who publicly argued with and embarrassed an academic gatekeeper. Well, years later, that exact same gatekeeper went out of their way to sabotage their former student's career. Because as the saying goes, resentment has a very, very long memory. If you bruise an ego on your way up, they are going to wait for the absolute perfect moment to pull you back down. So to master this dynamic, you actually have to play two distinct roles at the exact same time. On one hand, you have to be the cold, calculating strategist whose ultimate goal is to acquire power and win the battle. But on the other hand, you have to be the empathetic psychologist. Your goal there is to survive the war by carefully managing the emotions of everyone around you, basically ensuring the master always feels perfectly secure.
The Modern Power Playbook, from royal courts to the corner office.
Now, obviously, we aren't living in royal courts where we might get executed like poor Fouquet, so let's translate these survival tactics into a playbook for your 9 to 5 today. The modern interpretation of this rule shifts everything from pure defense to strategic offense. In the old days, you coddled the king just to survive. But today, the modern law is to make your master feel comfortably superior while you soak up and learn absolutely everything you can from them. The goal isn't just staying safe anymore, it's strategically advancing past them when the timing is exactly right. Our sources outline 3 modern ways to outshine the master, ranging from super diplomatic to absolutely deadly. Step 1 is being professionally neutral. This is where you frame all your big wins as being for the greater good of the company, completely hiding your personal ambition. Step 2 is the slow burn. Here, you outshine them, but you remain so incredibly friendly and helpful that retaliating against you would just make them look terribly petty. And then there's step 3, the most ruthless move of all, the swift takeover. For a masterclass in a swift takeover, look no further than Italian politician Matteo Renzi. Back in late 2013, as this rising star, he publicly, completely denied wanting the prime minister's job. He played the loyal subordinate perfectly. Then, in January 2014, he goes on live TV and literally tells the worried prime minister, Enrico Letta, to stay serene. It was the ultimate smokescreen. Because literally weeks later, at Letta's very first moment of weakness, Renzi blindsided him, forced him out, and took the job for himself. So much for staying serene, right? It's textbook. Play the loyal student until you become the master.
So, wrapping up the key takeaways of Law 1, the lesson is pretty crystal clear. Yes, your skill and your competence are incredibly important, but successfully navigating the invisible egos of the people above you, that is what actually dictates your ascent. Make them feel comfortably superior, attribute your wins to their stellar guidance, keep your own emotions perfectly in check, and always, always play the long game. Which leaves us with one final critical question. The game of power is being played all around you, every single day, whether you like it or not. Now that you can clearly see the hidden dynamics of this civilized war happening right there in your office, what is your very next move going to be? Are you going to be a pawn or a player? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I'll see you next time.